And shipping back. Are you ready? All right. Welcome everyone. Call it the please stand for the pledge. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, folks, thanks for coming in tonight. We started here with the adoption of the agenda. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda?
So.
Thank you, Jill. Is there a second? Second. Thank you, Rob. Discussion? If not, all in favor, say aye.
I would discussion.
Oh, have hand up, Amy.
Yep, I would like to remove item 6.3 as it is not in standing for a board chair to place something on the agenda that was failed at the meeting previous.
Okay, can we wait till we get down there on that subject item?
I'm asking that it be removed off the agenda. If I might finish.
Go ahead.
This has never been precedented before where the board has voted something down and at the next meeting, the board chair places it back on the agenda. It's also in our policy that that the board respect the will of the board when there's a vote. And in order for something to get placed back on the agenda, it needs to come from the prevailing side. I understand that there's nothing in Robert's rules that talks about the next meeting, but that's because board chairs don't put something on at the next meeting that has failed at the previous meeting. So either myself, Rob, or who else was it? Annette would have to ask to have it placed on the agenda again. If not, what's to stop a board chair in the future from again placing something at the next meeting? This is setting precedent and a very scary precedent for District 15, that a board chair would then go ahead and think that they have the right to do this. I did try and call you, Mr. Starr, on Monday, September 9th at 9:11, on Tuesday, September 10th at 9:02 in the morning, on September 18th at 11:55 a.m. I then tried to call Karsten on September 18th at 11:56 to talk about this not being on the agenda, that it wasn't proper protocol. And then I did call Brandon and speak with him last Friday. So I'm making a motion that it has been moved off the agenda.
Okay, prior for this to be on the agenda, we contacted the district's attorney and we contacted MSBA. And they both were in agreement that yes, we can put it back on the agenda because it's a 3-3 tie. It's a 3-3 tie. Who's prevailing? It's a 3-3 tie. So they both said yes, we can put it back on the agenda. So we followed our attorney's advice, and that's why it's back on the agenda. Rob's got a question. Rob?
Yeah, well, being that I was on the 3 that failed or whatever, and I can bring it back up, I would make a motion to bring it back.
Has to come off.
You have to vote it on first. So I need a second to vote.
I'll second.
Okay, so we got Amy with the movement to take 6.3 off the agenda. We have Pam with the second, correct? Further discussion? If not, all in favor of, to my right?
I think we're setting dangerous precedents by not following Robert's Rules of Order and MSBA and our legal guidance. They've already provided that guidance that a tie vote could be brought back, and we're setting dangerous precedents by ignoring our legal guidance.
All right, so, Rob, discussion yet on the first motion.
Right.
The first motion. I spoke with Brandon.
You know, stand by, Rob, had a hand up first, Rob.
Yeah, and I did contact Gary tomorrow from MSBA, so it's just interesting that there's 2 different things, because he said a 3-3 tie is technically a fail. So I don't know which way to go.
Okay, Amy?
Well, in my conversation with Brandon last Friday, it wasn't that. The reason given was that there's nothing in Robert's rules about the next meeting that you couldn't bring it back, but I've been board chair, I've sat on this board for 20 years. The dangerous precedent isn't for it to be brought back in the proper protocol. It is that a board chair thinks that he can put it back on after it's failed. It failed. It failed.
No, it was a 3-3 tie.
It failed. That's failing.
Our minutes say it.
All right, so let's move on with the vote, okay, Amy?
Can I say something?
Superintendent?
just to clarify, is there anything in Robert's Rules of Order that would prohibit us from bringing back an item on 3-3 vote?
Go ahead.
What the research I did was that it was a vote, it failed on a 3-3 tie.
Is there anything in
And
Robert's
so
Rules
the
of
prevailing side says that we're to bring it back. There's nothing in there that talks about the next meeting. But this is, I've sat here
In
for
other
20
words,
years.
The answer is no. There's nothing in writing in Robert's Rules of Order. The other question, is there something in policy or procedure that would not enable us to bring it back? The answer is no.
No,
Just
I
to let you
disagree.
know.
Amy, go ahead.
Is there not, Brandon, in our policy, that you respect the will of the board? Isn't there in our policy?
I'd have to look. I did not look before this.
Yeah, I think it's underneath our oath.
But the
But-
attorney and the MSBA both said it would be brought up, really at any time, including the next meeting. It's crystal clear guidance from those two entities.
Well, we'll call the question.
Let's go for the question. Okay, Amy has a motion on the floor to pull 6.3 from the agenda, all right? All right, so who's in favor of pulling superintendent negotiation 6.3 from the agenda? Please raise a hand if you wish to have it pulled. Please raise a hand. Okay, we have Annette, Pam, Rob, and Amy wishes to pull 6.3. Who's in favor of keeping 6.3? Raise a hand. And that's Nate, Jill, and myself. Okay, Rob, discussion. So motion passes for Amy.
Or
Rob,
I think that's an amendment to the agenda. So the amendment passes, so there's still to be a vote on the actual motion to approve the agenda without item 6.3.
Rob's got some.
Rob,
Can I make a motion to bring 6.3 back on since I'm on the prevailing side?
okay, Rob has a motion to bring it back on.
I will second
Prevailing
that.
side, who will second?
I'll second
Amy
that.
seconds it. Okay. No vote on the prevailing side. Who's in favor of bringing it back on 6.3? Please raise a hand.
Can we have discussion?
Oh, go ahead, wait, I'm sorry, yeah, discussion.
This is the way it should be. I hope in future that if something fails, that the prevailing side, someone on that side brings it back. A part of me wasn't gonna second and wasn't gonna vote to put this back on, but you know what? Even though you never called me back and you never called me back, you ignored my phone calls. Had you spoke with me, I would have said, I want it back on, but I want it to go on, first of all, the right way. Okay, I've sat here for 20 years. Never has something been placed on by a board chair at the next meeting that failed at the previous meeting. And second of all, I want to be fair to Karsten. Because when Rob voted, I know that Pam wasn't here. That was your vote, if I'm correct. So we need to be fair to everybody here and start being fair, not to have a rogue board chair. So I will second the motion and we'll move forward from there.
Okay, ma'am?
I've got another comment. So I listened to some of the conversation that went on, and the other thing that I want to speak against was the discussion around pulling me off of the negotiating committee. I am on the negotiating committee for the superintendent, and there was quite the discussion around pulling me off of that negotiating committee when here the vote wasn't even done yet. And then the vote ended up being a tie. I'm not here, nobody contacted me, and yet you want to pull me from the negotiating committee. I think that is out of order. I don't know where that came from, why that would have been a discussion, because it was not on the agenda to pull Pam or change the negotiating committee in any means, because I was on vacation. So I want to call that out and put that on the record, because I don't know where that came from and why that was allowed to even be discussed. So where'd that come from? It wasn't on the agenda.
Okay, ready to move on?
If I could just add one more thing, and I know we have a vote, coming up, which is really why we're here, but did you leave a voicemail, Amy?
No, I haven't done all the, and I don't think I've ever left your voicemail, but
Okay,
you have usually to my phone.
yeah, so I remember seeing that you had called, but because there was no voicemail, I didn't call back. So just,
I've never left a voicemail for you. but
well,
I'll
I
do that.
just want to explain why,
That's
you know,
fine.
you didn't get a return call.
Pam?
So my comment again was to Amy's comment of the behavior of you as a chair and why things are being brought up and things are happening the way they're happening. I wanted to get that on the record saying, look, that should not have been happening at the board meeting without me here, without me being notified. So I've said that, now I don't appreciate it, and I don't know why it happened. Hopefully it doesn't happen again. Okay.
Okay, so Rob has a motion on the floor to put 6.3 back on, Amy seconded it. All in favor of 6.3, stay on the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed. Opposed? Okay, we're gonna take a hand vote on Nate, yea or nay? To have it on the agenda. Annette?
No.
No. Pam?
No.
No. Rob?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Jill?
Yes.
Mike, yes. All right, so we got a 5-2 vote there. It stays on the agenda. Let's move on to consideration of visitors. We have two tonight. We have Gene Hogel's up next. Gene?
By the way, could we I think we might need a motion to officially approve the agenda because we had taken it off and then we added it back. So if there could be a motion to approve the agenda. Yeah.
I'll make a motion
Yeah,
to approve
yeah,
the
yeah.
agenda as amended.
Okay, so we have a movement. Thank you, Amy. For a second.
Second.
For Jill, discussion. All in favor, say aye. Opposed?
No.
Okay, Nate, approve the agenda overall, yes or no?
Yes.
Annette?
No.
Pam?
Yes.
Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. Rob?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Jill?
Yes.
Mike, yes. 6-1 vote. All right, move on with the agenda. Consider agenda. We have up first is Gene Hodo. Gene? 2-minute time frame for discussion tonight. 30 seconds to see the card pop up for you.
Good evening, school board and staff. I'm here to talk just a little bit about policy 606.5, library materials. I realize that it's having a first reading tonight, but this is kind of a little fine tuning. I took the latest policy, not the official policy, but the one you're looking at, and edited it again. I think some of you have seen this before, because I sent it to you. So I'll give out copies here. There's 8 in here, the whole policy, and my edits on it. The one revision I'm most concerned about is on page 5, section 7, D-2, I guess you'd read. You need to review the committee. You need to add to the review committee one resident with or without children in the school district. This recommendation is in the Minnesota School Boards Association Department model, which you all had, and whoever edited it the first time or put it in, took that particular statement out. It was removed from the policy. I'd like to see that put back in. I don't know why the school would want to resist having a parent on that committee. It's a bonus. It looks like you're being transparent, which is a problem here in this school district on some items. The school wants residents in the district to volunteer for other tasks in the school, so why not this one? Also, the rating criteria, which has got to come into play here somewhere. You currently have policy 524, which addresses internet acceptable use and safety factors. So that language in the future's got to have some rating to it. Got to follow some kind of guidelines. The school book committee can't really do their job without that. And I would strongly suggest to use the verbiage that's already in your policies. And
That's your time. Thank you, Gene, for standing up and to speak for us. Next up is Richard. Richard?
Let's see this.
Good evening, my name is Richard Klavacek. I live in Oak Grove. Here's an example of what I find objectionable about SEL. First, I would like to ask that anybody using my name to promote their agenda, ask me first, please. I do not support or promote SEL, and what was taught over 100 years ago is not what is being proposed by SEL today. Anybody who invokes my name without my permission lacks honesty, integrity, and also lacks soundness of moral character.
That's a criticism of a staff member.
It is hypocritical of the school board to restrict me from naming names, but you can use my name freely and without repercussions. Another thing I find objectionable is a review of pornographic material in the schools. It is a cumbersome process. It's a school board with slow walks, which is ridiculous considering what we are talking about. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Thanks for the SEL information you gave us last time. It was a big help. All right, next up on the agenda is consent agenda. Is there a motion to accept the consent agenda? Thank you, Jill. Is there a second? Thank you, Pam. Any discussion on consent agenda? Any discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you very much. Next up, information report, academic assessment results, 5.1. Who's in discussion on that? Oh, Ms. Stacy, come on up.
Good evening, Board. I'm here to go over MCA results. Hopefully you had a chance to preview it because I've been told I have 4 minutes, so I'm gonna condense. So starting with overall proficiency, we know there's some growth we can still have, but let's take a look at how we're doing compared to the state. We are below in math, we are slightly above in reading, and science we are below. But if you start to break down by grade level, you're gonna start to see where it's beginning to get growth, especially in the elementary and at the middle school. In fact, in some cases, it's 15% growth in math in several grades. And so I want us to acknowledge there is growth starting to occur. So hopefully you had a chance to look through these slides ahead of time. At the bottom, I had a P, meaning proficiency, adding up the exceeds and meets columns gives you that percentage. And so this is over 4 years is what is showing in each graph. So the strengths in this data is that we are performing better than the state in reading. Our math proficiency increased in 3rd, 4th, 5th. In fact, 5th increased, the exceeds area increased, and in 6th and 7th since the year before that. Reading proficiency increased in 3rd, 4th, 6th, 7th, and 8th since the year before. Science increased in 8th grade. And over 4 years, the highest proficiency in 3rd and 6th grade they had in both math and reading, and 7th in reading. So we still have plans, lots of plans that we're doing, and we've expanded. It's beyond my team. We've got administrators putting together school improvement plans, and they've got goals that their staff know are the goals, and we're talking about those goals in leadership meetings. And we are all moving the ship forward together, making those goals well known. We're doing the data mining in grade level teams, PLCs, leadership teams. My coaches go in, they do more data mining with teachers. We're updating curriculum in reading and math. We're secondaries starting interventions at both the middle school and high school during Saints time. That's the first time that will be occurring. So we're hoping kids that are showing need based on data will get a second dip of instruction. Elementary will continue math talks. We believe that's having a great impact. K, 4, and 5 are going to begin working with the math coach in PLC. She did the other grades last year. Elementary is working on phonics this year. That's part of our letters training, both basic and advanced phonics. And so there will be implementation behind that learning. And then we also have 3-5 getting some focus on comprehension and fluency work. Because looking at data, we've decided there is a need there. How do we improve that comprehension? Science will be in full implementation this year, K-12. So this summer, 9-12 had a summer training with Craig Cohn, and they have a new curriculum. They are just starting. There will be a new MCA test for science this year. So there'll be kind of a new baseline once we have that new test. We've added a district-wide literacy specialist per legislation, and she's already, and that's Catherine Phelps. She's already beginning a little bit of that work, helping me at the high school to work with the reading interventionists there to meet some needs of some students, and we're gonna do a little bit of training. I've also been sending our specialists through Teacher Academy to trainings that the state is offering. So this past summer, 4 or 5 math head kind of people went to some training, and we're gonna start meeting as a team now to talk about what's that gonna look like across all the levels, so all the way from kindergarten to 12th grade. So I'm excited about being able to get my specialists some training so that we can keep developing our Teacher Academy head, or our people who are specialists. All right, and then, do you have the other doc up? Do you have questions about this part before I go through the goals? Because I think there were district goals too.
Increase, does that fall in the same grade, or is that 6th grade this year, 6th grade last year?
What are you talking, I'm sorry?
Or the grades that increased or decreased or stayed the same? Are we all in the same classes?
It would have been that class from last year.
So you're talking 5th graders last year to the 6th graders this year?
If it said 6th grade, it would have been last year's 6th graders who are this year's 7th graders. Yeah. Yes.
Jill, got a question?
So for MCAs next year, following on the science, we may see changes based on a whole new testing. So to maybe expect either a drop or an increase because we're not testing on the same.
Yes, and science is structured slightly different now in the way we teach it. And so the MCAs will be kind of crafted around that. So it will be a different baseline.
Okay.
Not apples to apples.
Rob?
And those MCAs, if kids don't take the test, what's their score?
In the one that's published, it's not a 0. That is only with North Star. And that is not the one that goes up on the Minnesota report card.
Yeah, it's confusing because
Yeah.
there are 2 different ways things are shared, and in some cases it counts as a negative, and in other cases it doesn't.
I will say the high school and the middle school did a great job of having more people test and less opt-outs. And I think that is going to make a difference in the end too, that we are getting a better picture of our entire population of students.
Okay.
So we are encouraging our students to take the MCA test, because in the past, we weren't.
We are.
Rob?
Yeah, because I know last year, my son did PSEO, so he wasn't in the school all the time. Getting some of those kids that
Yes.
are going to score higher.
And we did get a lot of them to come back, which is good.
Right.
Yeah, and take the test, so.
Yeah, although that doesn't necessarily mean that, each one took it seriously. So that's gonna be the next stage, is to make sure that it's an accurate reflection of what they know.
And how do we do that, make them take it serious?
That's a big
One
question.
thing is having goal setting conferences with students and saying, when your data shows X, we're going to be giving you that instruction that your data is showing. So you really need to show us what you know so you get the correct instruction. We don't want to put you in intervention if you don't need to be in intervention. So we're really looking at data to drive where kids go for instruction.
So it's really individualized.
Okay?
Could I add one clarifying point? Earlier, Stacy shared a slide of the grades that have increased in MCA scores, which is really helpful, by the way. Just a reminder, though, that not all grades take the test. So, for example, grades K through 2 do not take MCAs. So obviously, they're not going to be on that list. Same with the high school. Sometimes some grades will take math, sometimes it's reading. And so it'd be impossible for them to increase the scores in those areas because they don't take it.
10th grade takes reading, 11th takes math. Okay, the other document that was attached was our district goals, and they're kind of organized as far as the results go by meeting those breakout goals, the dark blue, all the way down to negative growth, basically, or no growth, decline. None were in the red, we're happy to say. There was 2 in the orange, and one of those have already been corrected. The EAs that were not highly qualified went from, I think it was like 26%, it's now at 96% highly qualified because Deb had a 3-day training that they were able to go through and take the test, state test, and so that is already corrected. The rest of our goals are anywhere between the light gray to the dark blue, all the way up through the breakthrough goals. And I'm really happy to say those breakthrough goals happened in the behavior category. The less behaviors we start to see as being an issue, the better our academic scores are going to continue to increase. So that is a great place to be as far as behavior. Any other questions? Hopefully you had a chance to look at it.
So are we in a position then to begin tracking on a more regular basis and reporting to the board on a regular basis instead of, so much time? The goals. I mean, we don't see the goals very often.
Sure.
So can we see them monthly or maybe every 2 months instead of waiting for so long? Because again, if we're not watching, I know you're watching them, but if the board doesn't hear about it and there's not that accountability to the community and everything what we're doing, the agility of making sure that, for one thing, the transparency, the community understanding what we're doing, how we're doing, it just, the communication is huge.
I'd say
To be able to
probably,
communicate.
the most might be 3 times a year because Fast Bridge screeners happen in the fall, winter, spring. So there wouldn't really be a lot of between data on that until we hit those screeners. But
Why is that? Why is Fast Bridge only 3 times a year? Help me understand.
Well, there's progress monitoring happening between there that teachers do with their interventions that we're getting data into EduClimber with. I would say that's fully implemented at elementary, and we're just getting started with that in secondary. So I could share elementary data of that kind earlier than I could secondary. So we give time for kids to get their interventions, and that takes more than, monthly sometimes. We say 6 weeks, every 6 weeks is an intervention, so 6 to 12 weeks. And so that 3 months is 12 weeks, basically. And then we do a screener, okay, who's had growth, what's that showing, how are we doing, what do we need to change and tweak?
Okay. So maybe EduClimber could be something that we could make more visible.
Yes, we are starting to train all the teachers on it now, so. It's gonna
But at least 4 times per year, we can share academic achievements, so the 3 for Fast Bridge plus the MCA results that come out in August or right at the state fair time. So at least 4 times, if there was something like progress monitoring that can be reported, that would be fantastic. I just don't know.
I know we had a presentation, I think all the elementary schools. It was great to hear that and see and hear the excitement. And I think our community and our parents need to hear that and know that. And then if they're not seeing a change in their child, they got something to bounce it against. Right now, they're like, well, nobody's reading very well, so my child is doing like everybody else. And that may be the case, may not be the case. I just think that more communication would be.
Yeah, I think Sam and I can start looking at how could we communicate progress monitoring kind of data. So this, especially at the elementary, that's happening.
It's in place.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So we can start there.
Okay.
How about that?
Behavior data we can share more regularly.
Well, that too is all that's good, because whenever we have our goals against, if we can show progress or show, okay, well, we're stagnating, we're not doing anything, and we're not changing anything, so now we are going to, change what we're doing. We're going to try this, we're going to try that. It's just really important because there's just too many people who are saying, well, what are we doing? We're just not hearing, the communication. I know we have a communication person in place, so that's a good place to start.
Yeah, ideally, and we're not there yet, but at some point, it'd be nice to have a district dashboard on the website where this information
Where
can
it
be
gets
populated and then anyone can look at it anytime without digging through our materials.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the next phase. We're not ready to implement it yet, but you know.
And EduClimber has that capability, we just have to figure out how we get it to.
How to get it on there,
Yeah.
so if we could get going at that before the new year, that would be a good step. So these are those, you know, when we talk goals, we worked on goals, Carson, and Mike and I, these are those steps, right? These are those, get this done by here, this done by here, you know, those are those individual steps into reaching that breakthrough goal or wherever you land.
For me, the big difference, or, you know, because administrators use, you know, goal setting, smart goal setting, you know, quite a bit. But the one difference that really set us apart, and I gotta thank you for this, band, is the concept of breakthrough goal.
Right.
You know, dream big.
Yep.
Put the resources behind it, the emphasis on it. And I think that's a really good message.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stacy. All right, thank you much. Next up, information report will be the first reading of policy 504, 522, and 606.5. And this is the first reading. At our next board meeting, we'll make approval or not approval for these policies. Now, tonight, we're going to do something a little bit out of the ordinary. And we talked about this ahead of time with Brandon and so forth. 6065 about the books. Amy is on the committee and will make some comments about it, help educate everybody, and Brandon has some information too possibly there. So Amy, go ahead.
Well, it's just a quick, so board members are aware that this is just the first reading, and we'll not be voting on it tonight. But 6065 is the library policy, so just to add, just asking you to go through and look at the different possibilities, because during the policy committee, it was basically, I wanted something and Joe wanted something, and so where does it go? It needs to come back here to the board. So please find out what you're comfortable with so that everybody's aware, you've looked it over, and we can come back and have a nice conversation. But there will be decisions at this board on policy 606.9.
And you have two options on there, 1 and 2. You take a look at option 1 and 2 and understand what we're talking, not we, I'm not on the policy committee, but they came up with information. So between now and the next 2 weeks, questions, concerns, these two on the policy committee, along with Brandon. So give a phone call, clarify any information you may need before you vote next time. Brandon, any comments you want to add?
No, I just wanted to highlight it because it's a little bit different than our normal process of
Right.
first reading, so thank you for highlighting it.
Pam, question?
Not question, but discussions, right? We're in the discussion portion of the policies, right?
We're not voting on it.
We're not
Correct.
voting on it yet. So,
Right.
no comment, go ahead,
Correct.
discussion.
So I have provided, because this was not, you know, I went to the policy meeting, it was not discussed. The inputs that I had put in, I put these in January and I put them in again before the policy meeting again, so I put them in twice, but I wanted to make sure that everybody sees this, because these, again, are what I would like to see in our library policy. So I wrote them out so that everybody could look at them. If you don't agree with all of them, or you agree with some of them and not all of them, but this is what I have proposed as recommendations going into, and I understand that we want to stay with MSBA policies, but I do not think that they're defined well enough. And I think there's just too much room and that's why I believe that we have some of the books in that we have, and I believe that we will not keep it where this board maybe or the community maybe wants that. So I provided this. Is this gonna go in the record to Vanessa, since I asked for that to go into, it's like a visitor?
It'll be as an extra.
Yeah, okay. So I wanted to, this goes into the pornographic, obscene, and sexually explicit, obscene, abusive, or profane, lewd, vulgar, rude materials that use language or images that are inappropriate in the education setting. information or materials that could cause damage or danger or disruption of the education process, materials that use language or images that advocate violence. There's a lot of this in the books that we did, that were brought before you. I know one of our, Gene Woodall also put an email out, so I know you guys, if you read his email and read his attachments, he cited 3 different books that were full of, nasty, I call it smut, so I want you to look at this, please, and I want to have that kind of discussion before we vote on the policy and add what this board feels should be added to keep our literature academically based and reasonable and not way out there like that.
Okay, any other questions on the first reading of those 3 policies that will come up next week or 2 weeks from now? If not, move on to admin report, Mr. Superintendent.
Just 4 items to bring up. First, the Library Materials Review Committee will be meeting next Wednesday to discuss, well, kind of the process. It's the first meeting of this group, but then also hopefully tackle up to 3 of the books that have formally been challenged. So we're finally getting it started, and I want to thank Claudia Burville for her work in kind of organizing this first session.
Is that gonna be an open meeting that others can attend?
No, it's just the people who are on the committee, but we'll have a summary of what's discussed and any reasons that are given for either keeping the book in the collection or removing the book from the collection. So we'll be.
Hopefully that's very clear then, the academic value and language arts or whatever we think we're getting out of those.
Yeah, we'll, I'm not exactly sure what the format will look like. I know Claudia has been working on like a form to use that would include some of the criteria and policy and procedures. So it might be one of those things where we learn as we go, but yeah, we want to make it as clear as possible.
Yeah.
Even though we're not invited to attend the meeting, are we going to be able to see the documentation that you use to go through and look over the books and the process?
Yeah, certainly we can talk about the process, and then, the one thing we have to remember is that if, let's say, the committee denies the request to remove the materials, then it can be, the next stage would be to have me review it. And I will typically look at the grade range of the book and just make sure the process was followed. That's kind of my main criteria. And then issue a decision to the person who submitted the request. But then after that, it can still be appealed to the full school board. So certainly, at the level of the school board, you get that information. But most of the documentation, is public information. So anyone could put in a request there to see it.
Yeah.
What is the grade, what are you using as a tool? What's the grade, what's the tool that you're using? Just figure out if it's grade appropriate. What's the objective tool?
Yeah, so Claudia is going to be reviewing that. She may have her
She
own
hasn't have it
source.
picked out yet?
I know that she, indicated something that she likes to use. And so I just want to see how that jives with what is in our current procedure.
What's in our current procedure?
Yeah, what you could do, and anyone can look at it because it's on our website, but if you go under the policy section of the school board area, go to policy 606.5 and then look at procedures related to it.
Okay, so that's got that in there.
Yeah, and it lists multiple ones, but really I want to rely on, what Claudia uses. I think she'll be, really solid in terms of, what's used in that process.
Amy?
So I'm gonna ask the question again, what does Claudia use? And why can't that information be shared as just being,
Oh, it can be, but, I have a procedure that's on the website that lists like 4 or 5 different organizations. And then she brought up another one as well. And so, I just don't know the name of it offhand. Yeah, but yeah, clearly, I can easily, change the procedure to include that, so that we're all on the same page.
Can you get that to us before our next meeting so that we can at least take a look at that?
Sure.
And another question. Let's say someone wanted to watch, is this a closed meeting or is it just for some reason nobody can
Yeah, it's
be
just,
a part of it? Because that to me doesn't seem real transparent.
yeah, I mean, we'll be transparent with the results of the meeting, but, we don't open up all of our internal meetings to the public. It just isn't like that. So,
That's one of the reasons in my proposal is I proposed it to be a school board meeting. School board members attend it because then it has to be an open meeting and it cannot be closed. So that was one of my proposals, just so you guys all know that if a school board member is on it or two, then it would have to follow open meeting law and then it would be open to the public so they could at least observe and understand what's going on, just like our other important committees that we have. So that was one of my recommendations.
Any further discussion on 606.5? Please look at all the information that's out there. I know if I go back to my file on the information, I think there's 6 or 7 different websites that can be used to identify books. It all comes down to which one is going to be used. I sat with the middle school and watched Margaret use the machine over there, book after book after book, one person, all by herself, EA, part-time worker, and she does a great job trying to figure out what books should be at the middle school and which ones should be passed on over to the high school. Yet there's a lot of different websites out there. One works for me, one doesn't work for me. So again, a lot of information here, and it's a very complicated, it's not an easy process here to figure out what's vulgar to one person may not be vulgar to somebody else, determining what is what out there in all these books we work with.
and I'll add that, some of the rating agencies use grade level, others use age. So, sometimes these rating agencies will conflict. And so it's gonna have to be a review as many as we review. So, 3 more items. The school board candidate forum is tomorrow night at 7 o'clock in the high school center. It will not be live streamed, but it is gonna be videotaped so that people can see it after. And the reason it's not live streamed, I think, is because it's not here. It's in a different setting, so it was a lot easier to simply record it. Constitution Day, learned something new recently. There's a federal law that is explained by the U.S. Department of Education, indicating that districts must hold educational program about the U.S. Constitution on Constitution Day, which is September 17th. And, we were not aware of that federal requirement. And so that had not been done on September 17th, but I know Stacy has reached out to principals to make sure that that happens. I think this week is sort of the expectation. So we'll catch up. It won't be on that day. And, one thing, finally, I gave a good suggestion to the MSBA because we asked that question and they shared what state law is. And state law says we may provide that information about Constitution Day. It doesn't say will. So federal law, of course, overrides state law. And so I know that MSBA will be changing their guidance to schools based on the federal law. So, one of those things where we live and learn a little bit. And then finally, attendance on the planned late start. Board member did ask for information about attendance on last Wednesday, which is our first late start. And then I shared that information along with attendance on previous day and the next day. They're roughly the same on all 3 days, but of course, there's some caveats to it. First of all, at least with the first report I looked at through the year, Wednesdays usually have the highest attendance, but that's been fluctuating. So there could be an impact of the late starts on attendance. I don't want to say there isn't based on this data. But then on the flip side, I think there was maybe a field trip on that Wednesday, and, when we mark attendance, they have excused absence from those classes. So I think it's one of those things where we can continue to monitor during the year to see how attendance is impacted by online schools. Months isn't enough to really come to a judgment. Of course, the biggest impact on late starts is on parents, because, with younger kids, of course, they often need to make arrangements to get this kids to school a couple hours later. So anyway, just wanted to share that information with everyone.
Okay, any questions of the superintendent? If not, move on to action item. First one up, approval of the preliminary levy certification. Ms. Reedy.
Dee Carring, by the way, works for the Center for Efficient School Operations, or CISO, and she is now our business manager, representing us through CISO. So she has a great experience in multiple school districts as a business manager, and so we're glad that she's here.
Thank you. Is Ron still here?
He does not come usually in person, but he's still part of the CISO team.
Okay.
So things will change depending on the topic or the project, so he's involved in some ways, but Dee Dee is sort of the face of the business management here. Now, saying that, Dee Dee's gonna be gone for a couple of weeks, and so Ron will be coming in, here in the next couple of weeks.
Well, thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the school board, Superintendent Anderson. Before you this evening, we have the 24 payable 25 preliminary tax levy. So this evening, I'll give you a quick little background about some information on the tax levy process. I'll summarize the major changes from last year. In your packet, you received the document that shows 3 years. I'll just be going over the 2 years. And then at the end of all of this, we'll be asking you to approve the maximum. And I want to make sure, and you'll hear me say this several times throughout, the maximum doesn't mean the sky's the limit. It means that it gives us the finance team to work with the Department of Education on making sure that all of the aspects of the tax levy system is in place. The Department of Education changes the levy. It's been it started on the 6th, and I think we've had 6 different versions of it. So things are still being worked out by the Department of Ed, and it could be changes in such things as enrollment, and we want to make sure that St. Francis School District is not missing out on anything. So all the changes that will occur between now and September 30th is the purpose of having it at the maximum. Here we go. So state statute requires that the school board address and authorizes a initial or preliminary levy certification by September 30th. The purpose of the approval is to provide information to the county auditors so that the auditors can get the tax statements out to the taxpayers by the end of November. And then those of you who've been on the school board for a while, you know that the final levy certification will take place in December. There is what's called a truth in taxation hearing that will be provided. There'll be opportunity for members of the community to speak at that or ask questions before the board then takes action on the final certification of the levy. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. So in September, the school board must approve the levy, as I had stated, for their proposals for the collected taxes in 2025. While the school board could approve a proposed levy of a specific dollar amount, MSBA has also come out and recommending school district to approve the proposed levy at the maximum. The data driving the levy calculation can be updated as needed between September and December when the final levy is approved. Approving the maximum levy reserves the school board's ability to levy the maximum amount allowed by state statute based on information that is available. So again, everything driven by state statute. So what might cause an increase or decrease in tax levies? The local tax property used by school district to secure funding for those programs, which property taxes are mechanisms made available through the state of Minnesota and through state law. The majority of the school district funding comes through state or federal aid. Other than through specific voter approval, there are 4 major categories as you see on the screen here. The first is through changes in state law. It's important to note that the school district's ability to levy for local finance resources is highly regulated by state statute. A local school district cannot increase a tax levy without being specific statutory authorization to do so. This will be important to remember as we discuss the preliminary levy at the max at the end of the presentation. The second way that the levy may change would be on pupil units, number of students that we have, and any population changes that may occur. Some levy formulas are linked directly to pupil units, and some are linked to population. Community education is a prime example of where the population is important. As those numbers change, then the tax levy for the school district may change as well. The next category is the market value and the tax capacity of the school district property, so the property that's within our boundaries. And it's an important factor for our levies. Some levies are equalized, which means that the portion of the funding formula is paid through state aid and the remainder is paid through a local levy. So as the market grows, these types of levies are designated to decrease the proportion of state aid and increase the proportion picked up by the local levy. Specific to the St. Francis School District, the net tax capacity increased by 3.9%, and the referenda market value increased about 3.6%. So with that, it's important to remember, though, the tax levy might increase the tax base as that increases as well. That levy is spread across a broader base and at times can actually cause taxpayers' levies to go down. Finally, the last way to look at how levies increases is based on changes in expenditures. Certain levies are based on the expenditures that the school district has. Some of that is in school age care, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but also long-term facility maintenance, where it's based on the actual expenditures that are made. Whoops, we don't need volume. All right, how do we get out of that? Sorry, Vanessa. Thanks. There we go. Okay, so this is the total levy for the school district. There's 3 categories that the school district can levy for, and it's only these 3 categories or these funds. It's the general fund, community service, and then debt service. And I'll talk about all 3 of those in the upcoming slides. I have a slide for each of those. So you'll note that the general fund is decreasing by about $395,000. I'll talk about that in a little bit, or 5.62%. Community service is decreasing about $56,000, or just under 15%. And then debt service, one of the other larger portions of our levy, is decreasing by about $557,000. for a total of just over $1 million, or 7.21%. And I will go into detail about all of those on the upcoming slides. So first I'm going to talk about the RMV, or referenda market value, portion of tax base. And you'll see there's categories called voter approved and referendum market value other, and then same net tax capacity voter approved and net tax capacity other. The referenda voter approved levies, if the school district had an operating referenda, which gets voted on by the public, that would be included here. St. Francis does not have any. The referendum other, on the next slide we'll have that. And then the net tax capacity voter approved, that would be if the district had a capital project referenda or a tech levy, as most school districts call them. And then the net tax capacity other, we'll talk about those categories as well. Overall, general fund going down about 5.62%. So I'll spend a little time talking about these. So the local optional revenue categories are increasing by just over $126,000. And that's mostly due to that increase in the referendum market value that I talked about. Again, referendum market value is all properties excluding seasonal or parts of agricultural. So for instance, an agricultural property, the house, garage, and 1 acre is all that is taxed in these particular categories for referendum market value. So if a property or a farmer or had a large property with hundreds of acres of land, the land would not be imposed tax for this particular category. So in that, the local operational levy are based on changes in state aid and the increase in the tax capacity, as I mentioned. Then when we look at the next category, equity aid, I want to make sure that you understand that this is not programmatic aid for an equity program. It is an equity as it relates to equalization. So, which is essentially a vehicle that the legislature uses for school districts that do not have an operating referenda or a lower amount compared to other school districts. So for St. Francis School District, about $766,000 comes in this form of a levy to provide some funding for the school district. The other category that is the main driver of changes here is the adjustment category. And the adjustment category, as you can see, in 2025, in the certified levy had an adjustment of about $828,000. And I know that Ron Meyer talked about this last year. We had some lower projections of enrollment over time in the levy certifications. And when you do a lower adjustment and the enrollment actually comes in a little higher, the state will then adjust the levy to make sure the school district is not losing out on any money. So we had some of that occurring in the past. And so in 2024, it picked up and captured that. But in 25 proposed levy, we have kind of leveled off that enrollment projection to be a little more on what we think it is going to be. And to be honest, when I looked at the one for 24 and 25, projections are very close to where we actually ended up in 24 and the beginning of the school year. So having that on track is important. And fluctuations in enrollment can happen at any time, and being able to predict that can be challenging, such as during COVID. That's a challenging time to do it. So I just wanted to say that when you have a large adjustment, as we're seeing here in 1 year, and in the subsequent year it's not there, that's what causes the change. It's not that we're losing out on money, it's just the difference between those two categories. So overall, the referendum market value levies do decrease by 13.33%. Then if we look at those net tax capacity, and net tax capacity is all the properties in the district that is their market value of their homes by their classifications, and those figures are made and assessed by the county auditor, not by the school district. All of this is coming from information from the state and the county to develop what our net tax capacity and capabilities. On this slide, the bulk of the change is in total LTFM, or long-term facility maintenance. And I want to describe a little bit of why that is occurring. It isn't that we're getting extraordinary dollars in long-term facility maintenance. There's a certain amount that you get, and it's based on pupil units, age and square footage of your building, and whether you have a new building. So as your age increases, the more money that is available. If you had more students, that would be the case. The other factor has to do with whether or not you have a facility bond. And we have had two. One is expiring, in other words, it's being paid off by 2026. So that principal and interest, and I'm going to show you that in the debt slide, then is eligible to be used in the general fund for this particular category. So a similar amount, about $233,000 in the debt service. You'll see that as a change in our facilities bonds because that one particular bond has been paid off. Overall in this category, this is down 5.62%. Yes?
How is it down 5.62% when there's an increase?
Oh, my bad. Sorry. It should be a positive. Thank you.
Oh, no.
Yep. I will get that changed and sent out to the notes. So thank you for pointing that out. Okay, on to the next one, Community Service Fund. The Community Education Levy is the smallest of all of our levies, and so little swings in this, such as the $56,000 difference, does make an impact on this. The community education, there's two main factors that we see going on here. The increase in the state aid does cause a change in this particular fund, and so there's more state aid being paid here that is providing the district to not have to pay as much, or taxpayers not pay as much in levy. So that's decreasing about $17,000. And then when we look at the school age care, that's the one I wanted to spend the most time on. Because that one, as you can see in 24, was being levied at $54,000, and it had been for a while. And the major portion of the adjustments that you see in that category are due to previous estimating what we thought we needed in school age care. And so this year you can see we've got it to a level at $30,000. That's about where we believe those expenses will be. And so a decrease there in getting that estimated, and then a change because the overestimate in the prior year comes into that adjustment. So those two make up the more major portion of the decrease that you see in the Community Service Fund. And in case you're wondering, school age care, those tax levies are related to students that might have disability needs, or children of a family experiencing some problems of a temporary nature, and the child must be participating in school age. So it's not just to fund school age childcare. It is for a specific purpose for a specific group of children.
Question.
Yeah.
What is the home visits?
Home visits is where community education, we have staff where they might go out and home visit with a parent that might have a child, or where they're needing some additional care that the child can't get out of the home. And then the final category is the debt service fund. And I'm going to kind of draw your attention. The first three that are there are related to the voter approved debt. So when bonds are issued, those first three categories are related to that. The next three, long-term facility debt service, and the following two categories are related to those facility bonds that I mentioned to you earlier. So in the initial debt service, those are voter-approved bonds, and this is the levy that we propose here that is calculated, is based on the actual principal and interest payments that we make on those bonds on a yearly basis. You'll see that that amount is going down by $64,000 in the initial debt service. And that's partially due to the fact that the school district has refunded or refinanced, most people are familiar with, some of the bonds and getting a lower principal and interest payments that we're having to make. Second, the reduction for debt excess, that has to do with the calculation. So when we levy for the principal and interest payments that we make, there's a statutory requirement that we levy 105% of what is needed. And that's to make assurances that the bondholders are paid. Once the calculation, every year, the state of Minnesota looks at what the fund balance is for debt service and sees how much is in excess of that 105%, and then makes the calculation to take back those funds, which then goes back to taxpayers, okay? So it's kind of an exercise of making sure we have enough and then right-sizing that amount to a lower amount. And so then there's also, sometimes there's some adjustments. Most of the times, yes, it's going to be for past refunding of bonds. Then that next category, the facility debt service, similar situation where in that, as I told you earlier, where the long-term facility maintenance in the general fund was up, and this one is down because we had those bonds falling off. So that about 288, I think I said 233, but 288 compared to, I think it was around 290,000. It's just moving it out of the debt service levy, and now we can increase the general fund levy. And likewise, 105% must be, you must levy for that amount, and then the debt excess calculation comes in as well. So therefore, overall debt service, which is great, is going down about 557,000. So the final slide here on the actual numbers, and I apologize, there are a lot of numbers, but we want to make sure that you understand what is happening here. So the general fund, just over 6.6 million, community education, about $325,000. Debt service, just over 6 million for a total of 12.988. I will say that the levy runs for the last couple of days have held to that. But again, we want to remind you that we're going to want you to approve the levy at the max, which provides the maximum flexibility for the district to work with the Department of Education on any proposed changes that might happen, whether it's an error on their part regarding, say, enrollment. That's usually the one that is the biggest peak. So state statute determines what we can levy as a school district. If by providing this at the max, it doesn't mean we can do any amount we want or required under state statute. It just then helps with that ebb and flow of little tweaks that have happened over the next couple of months. So while you can decide in December, or you could decide to do this exact amount, but if there were changes made in the levy due to an error, that is the only amount that you can bring forward in the future. At the December board meeting, when we do the truth in taxation hearing and you certify the levy, you can make a change to lower the amount if you chose to. You can't go higher than what would be at that particular time, okay? So again, approving the levy at the max provides the maximum flexibility for the board and for the district, but does not allow for levying at a higher amount than state statute allows. All right, next steps. Tonight, asking you to approve the levy at the max. As I mentioned in December, we'll have a truth in taxation hearing, which there's requirements on what is proposed and what is brought forward for the board to review and for the community to see. There'll be an opportunity for the community members to ask questions about that or have comments. And then at that same meeting, then the board will be asked to certify the levy. And by the end of December, we have requirements to submit that both to the state and to the county. With that, Mr. Chair, I turn it over to you.
Further questions on all these big numbers?
A lot of numbers.
Any questions? Ms. Pam?
Yeah, so, the public obvious here is, we want to approve it to the max. Doesn't sound very good, right? If you're a taxpayer, and especially if you don't have any kids in the school. My question, I guess, is to Karsten. What do you guys do between now and December 9th? So if the board said, yeah, we're gonna approve it to the max, because then that gives us some opportunity to at least work with some things. What does your group do then? What does your team work at for that December 9th, truth and taxation and the vote?
Yeah, really, it's a business office function. And so we're relying on Dee Dee and her team to review the levy information, make sure it's accurate, monitor if it's going up or down. And so we follow, that lead. The 24 paid 25 levy is related to taxes for the 2025 calendar year. And then that impacts the revenue for next school year, not this school year. And so the primary goal for the admin team is to
better understand what our revenue is going to look like for that year. And we estimate expenditures, and then if we have to make adjustments like budget reductions, then we'll do that starting in January. After we have this information and the audit approved by the board. So really that's where we really jump.
So if the board were to say, no, we don't want to go max, let's say we go whatever, some lower number, then what happens?
Well, if that happened, and I've done that before in a different district, and because we looked at the increase in the levy and we thought we could make an adjustment that would not hurt our kids, and so we made that adjustment. You know, it doesn't happen often, but we do look at those numbers very carefully. We're lucky here because the actual levy is going down, at least with the preliminary. I mean, you know, adjustments are going to be made by the state, but that's a good sign. If there was an under levy, then that's factored in to the revenue budget for next school year. And so then we make decisions based on that.
And if I can just comment on what you said, I agree, the word maximum, it's been used for 25 plus years. Every school district I've worked in, we've used that term because it's the state's term, but it's really the opportunity to correct any errors that come forward that might have happened in the state of Minnesota. I personally had it happen at a previous school district. The state had an erroneous number in there, and it would have cost the district like $325,000 of lost revenue had we not done the maximum. So it's not to say the sky's the limit, it's let's make sure we get it in there at the amount that's appropriate based on our students, based on the information, and for what is in state statute.
And I think it's key that when people show up for the truth taxation, you know, we don't always have a lot of people here. We only usually have just a very, very small handful of people that actually come and for that presentation. So I think it's really important that our community shows up and asks those questions and make sure that if they feel that there's things that can be done or shouldn't be done or whatever, that they get that on the table at the time. So I just wanted to have that little bit of discussion so that our community can understand this is really an important piece.
Yeah, and when we get to December, it will be a hard number.
Correct.
Yeah, it's a hard number, it's done. My guess, it's not going to change much at all. Since we started it in beginning of September, it's maybe changed $50,000.
Well, that's why we did the bonds. We took those bond actions and we did, and we did that the previous year too.
Yeah.
By the way, I agree, the questions help us provide responses. The more communication, the better. So it's a good thing for everyone.
Well, I would just like to add that school boards don't have the levy authority to levy what we want. We do have someone from the city of Oak Grove here sitting with us, and they do. They can increase their levies and they can decrease their levies and decide they're going to hire police or they're going to do roads or bridges or whatever. School districts, if you don't approve the maximum levy, with our district not having an operating levy, this is all set in statute. This is how we receive the funds from the state, which is set in state statute. If you weren't to go the maximum levy, you're then denying the revenue that the state has approved for our children. So it would be very detrimental to District 15 to not approve the max. I don't like the word maximum, but okay, it's the maximum, but it's the maximum that is allowed by the state set in statute. We don't get to decide here like cities and counties. We approve what the state approved, and this is the avenue that needs to be done. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Well,
Thank you.
Yep, good information. All right, any questions, comments? Good information given out now. We allowed it all to happen here, but we need a motion to accept. Bill? Move, second? Second, Amy. Any further discussion on approval of the preliminary levy certification? Any questions? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Thank you very much. Thank you for the information. We'll see you back in December with more numbers for us. Approval employment agreement for office professionals. The motion to accept.
So,
Thank you, Jill. Second. Nate, thank you. Second. Discussion on OPs for their contract. No discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you very much. Next up is approval of superintendent negotiations. Prior to moving to it here, well, first of all, let's get a motion to accept. Motion to accept.
so,
Thank you. Second. Nate, second. All right, discussion. First of all, the items on the agenda tonight. That item is placed on the agenda after there are many discussions and meetings of how this comes back on the agenda. There's no grown person running this agenda. It's all based on what's legal, what we can and cannot do on the school board. That's why legal was contacted, MSA was contacted, other people were contacted. What do you do with a 3-3 vote? And the discussion was, yes, you can bring it back up for discussion. If it's a 3-3 vote, it's a tie. And that's why it was put back on the agenda, not because the chairs are rogue chairs, that's what we wanted to do out here. After meetings were held, after discussion was held with legal and MSBA, it was put back on the agenda. That's why it's here tonight. So further on right now, just so you know why it's put back on the agenda. Discussion on approval of the superintendent negotiation to move into negotiation. We're not approving the contract, we're just saying, let's have discussion like we just did for the OPs. All right, discussion, questions? Discussion, questions? Okay, Ms. Haney?
Is it a 3-year contract? Is it a 1-year contract? What are we talking?
Most times we're doing 3-year contracts, correct?
It's really,
Most times.
yeah, it could be up to 3 years, but really it's at the will of the school. Well, it have to be an agreement between the school board and the superintendent. You know what that would look like. So it can be up to 3 years, but you know, it's really, I don't know if that would be decided here or perhaps in the negotiations committee if this passes.
Jill?
I was just gonna say, I think those details would be left up to the negotiating committee to meet with the superintendent to see what he was looking for, and then bring it back to this committee, or bring it back to this board.
Ms. Amy?
So I have a question on who's on the negotiating committee.
Okay, go ahead.
Because I know you said you would step back because you weren't running again. And then you, according to the last meeting, you removed Pam, or you talked about removing her, and then keeping Rob out. I strongly feel that's not fair, because there's no guarantee that Rob's gonna get reelected. So why would you remove one person because they're not running? And it really doesn't matter, because there's plenty of time to negotiate a contract between now and January. You'd think you'd want some board members that have experience in this area than just removing, especially ones that were talked about and agreed upon. Because everybody knows what negotiation committees they set up.
So again, yeah, Ms. Jill?
I think we should hold up on this discussion until this item is decided and the motion is complete, because as Ms. Johnson said, having that discussion during a motion when the discussion wasn't that topic, we shouldn't have been discussing it. So I think we should stand by what one of our board members has already stated she was opposed to from our previous discussions. So I call a question on the current topic.
Clarification,
Okay, go ahead, Ms. Pam.
am I still on the negotiating committee or am I not? Is there some decisions that's been made outside of this meeting or not?
Okay.
I just want clarification. Has the negotiating team been changed without my knowledge?
Okay, this is what we're at right now for negotiations committee. Rob has got a hold of me. Last go around, it was discussed about we should have people on the committee who's gonna be here for the next 2 years. Because in the beginning, it was Pam and I and Rob, the 3 of us may be gone in January, because we're not running. And Rob may be elected, maybe not elected, we didn't know. Rob got a hold of me. Rob says, take me off the committee. I'm busy, I got things going on. please take me off the committee. No problem, we can do that. So there's discussion who will be on the committee. And what I'm looking at is Nate to be on the committee, Jill on the committee, and myself on the committee, and Pam was taken off the committee because she was here, she was gone, and some of the comments made, so it was decided tonight, I was going to ask the question for Nate and Jill and myself as chair to put people on committees and take off committees. And so I took Pam off tonight in public, I was going to talk about that anyways, and asked Nate and Jill to be on the committee because they're going to be here for the next 2 years. I'm gone, Pam's gone, Rob may be here, but he asked to be taken off the committee.
I do not want to be removed from a committee that I was put on, placed on, without my knowledge. I don't think that that is right, that you pull me off of that committee.
You were pulled off the committee because you're going to be gone in December.
That
The
doesn't
comment
matter.
that
We
you
are
sent to me,
still.
I have the floor, and the
You're
comments
still
you
here.
sent to me about negotiations committee, I felt you wouldn't be fair on it, so I might as well just pull you off the committee. And that's why as chair, I removed you from the chair, from the committee.
I think that's out of order.
No, not out of order. Chair can set committees, and your comment that you sent to me about the negotiation committee, the negativity, I'm not going to have any issues during the committee. So I'm
All right,
asking
then.
Nate and Jill, they
My
agree.
understanding was Annette also volunteered.
Pardon me?
Why, Annette volunteered, she's gonna be here.
I picked Nate.
Why, you're not gonna be here.
I
Why
set
you
the
want?
agenda, I set the committees, I pulled you off, I'm taking Rob's discussion, take him off the committee, I'm putting Nate and Jill and myself on the committee. It's been set.
But you're not gonna be on the board either next
That's
year.
right, I'll be gone.
So why would you stay on the committee? And why would Annette not be on the committee? And why has this all been done behind the scenes?
It was not done behind the scenes.
It wasn't not?
First time hearing
The first you're hearing it. So it was done behind the scenes. There was discussion behind the scenes, not at the school board meeting,
It
by
does-
you.
As chair, you can set the committees, you know how that works. I've set the committee, I removed people off the committee, we're moving forward at this point,
Can I
okay?
have a question?
Amy has a comment, yes ma'am.
That's done in December and into January. I've never seen it done this time of year, ever. So again, you're setting some,
And I've never seen the negativity comments sent to me about the committee either from Ms. Pam Johnson. Very negative. That's why I don't want her on the committee. It won't be fair.
well,
Go ahead.
the negative comment is that when I asked you last board meeting, if Pam sent you anything about whether or not she wanted the superintendent to continue to be superintendent, and you said you would get to that, and if my recollection is correct, you never did mention how, because she wasn't here and asked that you tell the board, I don't believe you ever did at the last board. Is that what you're talking
Because I
about, or
was
is there
not gonna be
something else?
the voice of Pam at the meeting without her being present. Now, if you want to hear what she wrote to me, I can give it to you.
Well,
If you want it, I'll give it to you. Go ahead.
you can ask Pam, did she not ask that you share it with the board since she wasn't gonna be here?
And that was not gonna be her voice on the negativity that she wrote to me.
We all decided which, and it was all decided in January. For you to all of a sudden, behind the scenes, without Nate's knowledge, evidently you and Jill have talked about it, change the whole committee up. And choosing the three individuals by the way that you have, and the way the voting has been going, and leaving Annette off, I think it's just totally uncalled for. I think it's totally out of order. I don't think that that should be done. I think it should have remained. It's not been done in the past for Amy.
So you want me to publicly?
I am talking about why the committee was changed. And you can't go by somebody's view at that point in time.
Should I talk
The
about it?
board has now made a decision, okay, the board has now made a decision, so that isn't even valid anymore.
This is not valid.
It's not.
Well, it sounds pretty negative to me when you
It's
said it.
not valid.
So now you're backing up what you said about,
It is not valid because we have to go with the voice of the board. So this whole board, we are one voice. When the board voices one voice, we all have to go in that direction. For you to change everything up in between meetings without having a discussion at the board table, Our community does not know what's happening because you're behind the scenes deciding what's gonna happen as the board chair. That is not how this has ever been done in this chair, this board. Asking me.
Placing committee, I've never had this trouble in 12 years either, until the last couple of months.
I don't know what that means.
Fact of the
I don't know what
matter
trouble
is,
means.
the chair set the agenda of the committees. Chair always can move people in and out of committees. It's just part of the job of the chair, unfortunately.
For
I
the
made this-
reasons
I have
of
made
what?
the decision for the 2 people here who's gonna be here for the next 2 years.
But you're not.
That's correct.
So why is Annette not on it? She's gonna be here. She's here, all 3 of these individuals are here for the lawn.
Miss Amy?
So I just, when do Robert's rules where you disagree with the rule of the chair? And I would make a motion that Annette would be added on to the committee and that Mr. Starr would be taken off for the reason that you said at the last board meeting that you were gonna remove Rob, or that you were gonna remove Pam. But you were gonna keep Rob on because he might get back on, I think is what the words were. So if you're gonna do this, then everyone who's not gonna be here next year, including yourself, needs to not be on the negotiating team, and it would then be Jill, Annette, and, yes, and Nate. That's fair. I'm gonna make a motion for that.
I call the question.
Okay,
I think what you're asking for is to amend the motion to identify the committee members.
Yes, that I disagree with the rule of the chair, which can't be done. You can disagree with the rule of the chair.
Yeah, sorry for jumping in there, especially since I'm the person you're negotiating with, but that's how I'm
And I would
kind
change
of
the
reading.
committee to reflect
Back to where it
and
was.
have, well, either back to where it was, or that it would be Jill, Nate, and Annette.
Miss Annette?
I make a motion that the committee remains as it was established.
There's a
and set.
Well, we have to have.
All right, everybody, then we get too many motions here, and we got them so all messed up. All right. We have a motion on the floor to accept the superintendent negotiations. Now, we have an amendment to that someone's making. Who's making an amendment to what?
I think,
Well,
Miss Amy?
people are deciding whether or not they're gonna vote for this based on the committee, on who's on the committee. So I think we need to decide who's on the committee, and I disagreed with the rule of the chair and asked that we change it, either back to the original negotiating team, or that you put the new committee together with Mr. Starr off of it and Annette on it, which would then be Nate, Annette, and Jill. I'm fine with either one, but I'm not fair, it's unfair the way you've done it right now. That's why I'm disagreeing with the rule of the chair.
All right, so your amendment is to change it with Annette, Jill, and Nate. Correct? That's your amendment. Is that what you're asking?
Well, yes, because,
Right?
yes, I'll say that, yes.
Okay. So there's a second to Amy's amendment. There's a second. Jake, Jake. Sorry, Jake. Rob. All right. Okay. Any further discussion on what Amy's asking for? If not, okay. The amendment is reading, I get you. The amendment's gonna read that Annette, Nate, and Jill will be on the committee. That's what we're voting on. One last discussion, go ahead.
The only point I want to make is, at the beginning of this meeting, there was a lot of discussion about how we shouldn't be discussing who's going to be on the committee before we approve if we're going to negotiate a contract. And now all of a sudden that conversation has been flipped, that we should be discussing that. And who's on the committee should not determine if we negotiate a contract. Who's on the committee, we should be either deciding, are we going to negotiate a contract or not? Then we should decide who is going to be on the committee, and that's the next decision.
Okay, so.
I will say, I will remove mine, I'm fine with that. That's fine. We'll discuss who's gonna be on the committee afterwards.
Okay, Ms. Pam. But your amendment
So you
is.
have to remove your second as well.
Okay.
Well, my comment
All
back
right.
to Jill is, I had no idea that I was changed from a committee. It was not discussed at a board table.
It doesn't have to be. Doesn't have to be.
Yeah, I think it does. That's open meeting law.
Well,
Go ahead, Amy.
It doesn't have to be, but I would say that it should be.
All right, so help me out. We have a motion on the floor to accept. But Amy, you're changing your amendment, you're dropping it.
Now it's just for the.
To approve the, negotiation, to go into negotiations. Okay, and then we'll come back to committee members, all right? So, all in favor to enter negotiations?
Can I ask for a roll
Yes.
call vote?
Yep, we're gonna roll call vote. Nate?
Yes.
Annette?
No.
Pam?
No.
Rob?
Yes.
Amy?
No.
Jill?
Yes.
And Star, yes. So 4-0, we're gonna enter into negotiations. 4-3. 4-3, we're gonna enter into negotiations. Now, who's on the committee for it, right? That's what you want to discuss next. Okay, someone want to bring up a motion or say something, go ahead. Is there an amendment, or you want to bring something up, Ms. Annette?
I make a motion that the group stays the same. The negotiation team stays the same as it was said.
My second.
May I ask, who that was, because I don't remember.
The original, Rob, Pam, and myself.
Sam, Rob,
Rob,
I did ask to be off the committee. I've been laid up for 4 weeks. I don't know how much time I'm gonna have, and then hopefully gonna be able to walk on Thursday. I'm gonna be doing 60-hour days, and I don't know when I'm gonna be able to.
Nate,
Are we in discussion right now?
in discussion.
Okay. So what would we typically do if someone were to ask to be removed? So if Amy asked to be removed from the policy committee, that is up to the board chair, correct?
Correct.
Like that's the standard way that we do it. I'm gonna throw a little comment in, but a school board handbook would be really nice because it would explain some of this stuff to us and how we do these procedures. But if someone is asking to be removed, that would typically go back to the school board chair for selection, or you would ask other members who would want to be involved, correct? I'm guessing that's what we have done in the past. Right?
Yes. Okay. Comment, question, we have a motion and a second on the floor, right? That the original people be back on the committee, except we found out one can't make it. All right, so we're gonna take a vote and see what comes up on it. Take a roll vote. All in favor of Annette's, yes ma'am, yes sir. Rob?
I guess is the roll vote with me staying on, or?
Well, the amendment is that you're on, that the original people stay on it. Yes, Amy?
And this is my comment, Rob. If you don't want to be on it, all you have to do is call Mr. Starr. Mr. Starr, being the board chair, will then appoint someone to be on in your place. No one's gonna make you be there, but I think that's fair. That's all I'm looking for as a board member, is for things to be fair all the time, not sometimes. And this will be fair. This is the way it's done.
Good, so we have a motion and a second on the floor. Nate, yes, here Nate, to keep the original three, Pam, Rob, and Star. Here Nate.
Yes.
Annette,
yes.
Pam,
Yes.
Rob,
Yes.
Amy,
Yes.
Jill?
No.
And Star is no. All right, so it's a 5-2 vote. Okay, we have a board now, yet, or a committee. Yet, Rob, you said you want to come off the committee.
I'll call you later.
Thank you, call me later. All right, and I'm gonna reach out and appoint someone. Ms. Jill?
And I just want to give public knowledge, I had reached out to Mr. Starr at the beginning of this month, asking that the composition be changed, because as the board was changing, there should be somebody who's on the committee that will be on the board next year.
And that's why I was picking Nate and yourself, to be honest. It'd be fair for the next 2 years. All right. Any further discussion on where we're at right now? Committee right now, Rob will get a hold of me. I'll get a hold of Nate and Jill, and we'll go forward from there.
So I want to, again, make a recommendation that Annette go on.
The chair will make a
Because she
selection.
will be here next year.
Now, does Pam want to be on the committee or off the committee?
I'm saying from a replacement standpoint, instead of you already choosing. I'm just making a recommendation.
So are you going to contact me to stay on or stay off?
I'm just making a recommendation
For Annette?
for Rob's replacement for Annette.
Yeah, but what about you? You wanna be on the committee or off the committee?
I'm not, I'm on the committee.
You're off the committee
I'm
then.
on the committee.
You wanna stay on it?
I'm on the committee.
Okay, I'm gonna verify, see if the chair can change that. If he can, he's gonna make the change. All right. So right now, we're moving forward with it. Rob will be getting hold of me. I'll reach out for another fill point for Rob. Okay? Any questions?
I know it's gonna sound strange after this discussion and it's political, but I appreciate the discussion and the willingness to at least consider 1 to 3 more years for me. I love living and working in St. Francis. And I know there are different views on all sorts of things. And so I'm gonna continue to try to find common ground wherever I can. So again, thank you for that.
All right, we'll move on and take off this, go ahead.
Yeah, just for information, nowhere in our board meeting minutes have we approved who our negotiating committee people are. I did just confirm that. Took me a little longer because I was moving slowly, but nowhere did we ever confirm that in a board meeting. That's all set by the board chair, and that's how we've done it. The meeting that we approved committee assignments was January 22nd, 2024. If you want to verify what I'm saying, that's where we approved our committee assignments, not our negotiating committee assignments, but our committee assignments. And it's a negotiating committee.
Ms. Ham?
But we're all told which committees we're on by the board chair. And it just needs to be fair. If you think it's fair, Joe, that's fine, you can think it's fair. I'm looking out, and I can tell you a lot of our community members, I'm getting phone calls, what's going on at the board table, they don't see it as being fair at all. That's fine, if you think it is, I don't think it is fair at all. At MSBA, oh, they say we could do this? No, I mean, it failed. It failed. I put it on again, and I didn't have to second it. You couldn't have seconded it to put it back on the agenda, just an FYI. It has to come from the prevailing side, which is Annette, Rob, or myself. I figured it would go through. I'm not a fan right now. I don't get phone calls back. I've tried to get policy in this district that keeps our schools neutral. The whitewashing of recall. I've waited for 3 years. I've never gotten it. And it isn't about getting my way. It's about having an opportunity at this table to vote. That's all. To vote, to discuss. Not to be ignored, not have my phone calls answered. That's all, is to be heard. You may think it's fair, it's not fair. That's all I have.
All right, move on. Anything else? Any other comments? Yes, ma'am.
Just one other point.
Go ahead.
We've always ensured that persons that are going to be involved in the next board coming in are involved in a negotiating process. And involved in the interview process. We did that with the previous superintendent. We've always tried to do that. And I don't think it's fair to keep it with persons that will not be on this board and be responsible for a decision or negotiation, individual negotiations, and understand what those negotiations were. And there needs to be somebody who's going to be on the board come January, involved in those discussions. Because those are not public discussions. They're with those 3 people, Brandon and the superintendent.
Okay, Ms. Annette?
How many somebodies have to be returning that need to be on that board, making that decision, negotiating?
I didn't say a number.
Okay, so there should be, by what you're saying, essentially, there should be nobody on the committee negotiating that's not returning, is what I'm hearing. Yet Mike is on it, he's not returning. He picked himself, you, and Nate, he's not returning. Why would you pick yourself to stay on the committee if you're not returning. But we're concerned that people that are returning should be the ones on the committee. That's where it's just looking a little off.
Go ahead, Ms. Graham.
So the other comment I want to make is why don't we just hold off and let the negotiations go on with the full brand new committee? Because then that committee is going to vote, because we still have to vote on the acceptance of whatever the negotiating team comes up with. So then why don't we just wait for the whole process to start in January with the full new board? So, I mean, that's something else to consider. If we're worried about who's gonna be and who's not gonna be and who's gonna be, going forward with the superintendent, then let's move it off to January.
No, that won't happen. Nate?
Yeah, we already approved to enter into negotiations with the superintendent. As
So
of
there's no time, there's no time frame. You can wait till January then and wait for the full brand new board with the brand new chair to negotiate a contract with the superintendent of their wishes. If you're gonna make common sense out of it.
Go ahead, Ms. Amy.
I think what's being pointed out is that it doesn't make any sense. The
No.
rulings, the you're on, you're off, it isn't fair. It hasn't been fair. And it's just based on, I don't know what it's based on. I'd have to ask you what it's based on. I'm not gonna speculate what it's based on. I can't tell you I'm getting phone calls from people that say it doesn't look fair. What is going on at that table? Why does, only you can answer that, Mike. But again, you were so rushed that it had to be done at the meeting when Pam wasn't here, which is why Rob voted against it last time. It wasn't that he didn't want to offer him a contract, which is why I voted to put it back on again. You know what I could have done? I could have said, nope, I'm not gonna second. And that would have seconded it, and he wouldn't be getting a contract right now. But I didn't do that, and had you called me, you would have figured that out maybe, found that out.
Well,
But instead, I didn't get phone calls back, but that would have been fair to Rob, and it wouldn't have been fair to Karsten. Whether I want to hire him again or not, one thing I am is honest and fair. I do not see that happening at the full board table right now.
people love to make these phone calls all the time and don't back up to it. I can verify to tell you what happened. First time at the funeral home, my sister from my brother-in-law, when the phone call came in, I don't take phone calls in the funeral home. Then I'm at the BMW working on Celebration of Life with a brother-in-law, the other phone call came in. The other time I'm talking kettle corn, I don't take phone calls when I'm on kettle corn business. So that's why the phone calls are taken back, and then I forgot to call you back after that last one. So that's where the first three were at. I was dealing with the death in the family, and I don't take phone calls in the funeral home. So that's why no phone calls are given back to you. Now, to be fair to everybody, when Miss Pam gave a very, very negative comment to me to be her voice, I took it as she no longer wants to be on the committee. That's why she was removed from the committee. That's why.
I would have said
But
it.
I reached out to two other people who will be around for the next 2 years. Now, if Annette wants to be on the committee, you want to be on the committee, Annette?
I'm not gonna replace Pam.
Because if you go on the committee, it will be you, Nate, and Jill. I'm gonna take Pam off.
No, I don't wanna replace Pam.
Okay, well, I'm not gonna put the two of you on the committee. So we'll go forward from here. And as a matter of fact, we'll verify, that's right, we're gonna verify through, and please film that for me, and you need to film over here also. We'll verify through legal again, chair's responsibility. And right now, the chair is appointing Nate and Jill and myself on the committee. If Annette wants to be on it, I'll take myself off, I'll put Annette on the committee. Be the three of you who will be here for the next 2 years. If you want to do that route, you can do that, Annette. That's up to you. You tell me.
Yeah, I'll take your spot.
You want to do that? Okay, no problem. We have Annette, Nate, and Jill in the committee. The three of you work with Carson over here to get a date and time set for your first negotiation committee meeting. Then we usually do a one-time meeting that's quick and it's easy with superintendents. It has in the past been that way. So the three of you work it out and get a date set with the superintendent. Pam and I and Rob is off the committee. As chair, you can do that. All right, anything else? Honky dory? All right, move on then. Upcoming meetings, you see that on your board book there, what's coming up in the future. School board member reports, Mr. Nate.
Okay, aren't we gonna have a discussion on the upcoming meetings?
If you want, go ahead. You
Yeah.
got something to add?
Yeah, I do. So on Monday, October 14th, so that's gonna be a work session, and it's gonna be with communication planning. What I'd like to add to that is discussions around the changes in Title IX. I forget what the policy number is, guys. It's the one that we're gonna vote on next week, but I'd like to talk about how do we communicate to our community and maybe like on field trip forums and all that, the changes and how that could affect students staying overnight, locker rooms, restrooms, the whole works. So I'd like for us to have that discussion at that meeting and talk about we need to get in front of and we need to try to do something that makes sure that everybody is aware of what's going on so that parents can make choices as to how they, their kids participate or whatever. Or we can have a discussion if there's anything else we can do as a board to try to get in front of or get ahead of certain things that could cause us issues in the future.
If, I agree with having a discussion, my only question is timing, and I'll need to rely on Brandon, because he's the Title IX person. Is October a good time to have that discussion or not?
We're still getting trained. This was in a training on Friday. I'm getting up to speed on the new regulations.
Okay.
So there's a lot of uncertainty out there right now. Having more time will get me to a better point where I understand everything fully.
I thought it was pretty much nailed down because of Minnesota statute. That we aren't gonna, nothing's gonna change in Minnesota because our legislation already passed the equality.
Correct, but that's not Title IX, then. That's Minnesota law.
Okay, right, but, okay, I thought there was minimal, that we had to do anything changing because we were already in alignment, I thought, with the federal.
Correct, Minnesota, human rights law.
The human rights law, that's what it is.
Is, very similar.
It's already in alignment.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood. When I thought in Title IX, you were talking about.
No, sorry, Title IX's piece of, but yeah, no, I'm talking about the laws that we already have in place in Minnesota. For which policy is it, you guys?
522.
522. That's what I want to have the discussion around is 522 is the equal access. Equal access to the locker rooms, equal access to restrooms, equal access to. I don't know that sports got included.
It is all part of the Title IX, but to me, I'm hearing more that's a discussion of Minnesota.
Yeah.
And Minnesota court cases that have put their expression on what the law is.
Okay.
So as far as timing, is it October, November?
The more time would be better, but if October is, if it's deemed urgent, we'll be as prepared as we can.
Well, the reason why I say that is because we're going to be voting on the policy 522 at our next meeting. So it'll already be in place, and does everybody understand it? And do parents know the choices that they're going to have to make based on the knowledge that they currently have or don't have? And I'm afraid that people don't have the knowledge. So I think that we as a school district need to make sure that they all understand things are changing. And they need to be well aware of the changes that are happening so that they can make decisions for their students, their children.
If the group is okay with it, how about if I tentatively put it on the agenda in October? But if we could rely on Brandon to indicate if he has enough understanding to present it or not.
Yeah, because I was just, and maybe we just brainstorm some ideas because I saw that we were talking communication planning. So we can probably just brainstorm some ideas if we can't make something solid, but we're not gonna vote or anything anyway, but at least have that strong discussion at the board table so that we can come up with some ideas and maybe our community can come up with some ideas to help us to navigate
it's a significant issue, and so if you're okay with that, and we'll give you some flexibility, but we'll shoot for the first meeting in October. Actually, now that you brought up the first meeting in October, just to let you know, we had originally planned to have a report tonight from Doug Austin and the counseling group about career readiness work in the district. They had another big issue, and so they requested it to delay it. It's up to a 4-minute report. If you're okay, I'd like to add it to the work session on October 14th. But I've learned with time that, usually those workshop sessions in St. Francis are kind of based on big topics that we're going to really discuss. But if you're okay, I'd like to add that as just a 4-minute report at the beginning of the meeting. So, as long as that doesn't violate policy, does it, Brandon, if we have a report like that? So I'll confirm that with Doug, and so we'll have that as well. And then, one thing, we have 3 or 4 board members who won't be here next year. And if there are some issues that we should talk about together as a group, I can certainly, add some more workshop topics that Amy brought up, the neutrality goal or issue. And then specific, so I could add that to an upcoming workshop session if people are open to that. And as far as neutrality, we're mostly talking about like posters and flags and those kinds of things.
Yep.
So I don't know what people think about that discussion. It could be a policy issue too, which would go through the committee, so.
Amy?
I brought it up a few times at policy and it doesn't go anywhere. That's why I'm where I'm at, where we're at 2 years, maybe 3 years now, later, because
Talking about it, never got
it doesn't get done because Jill and I are, different. And so usually that's why the 606.5 is getting brought to the board, for the board, full board to discuss, so.
Okay, Nate, or Robbie again?
Just October 14th is the national holiday, so making sure we're fine meeting that day. I'm sure it's been looked at, but just want to clarify.
Yeah, I think for Minnesota schools, it's okay. But, sometimes people are wrong, so we'll double check.
Any other, Joe?
So at our next meeting is a work session, so we're going to be voting on the policies, because the second reading would be at the second meeting in October.
Oh, October 28th,
Mm-hmm.
right. Yeah.
So,
Unless there's a topic like that we need immediate action, and I'm not familiar with what that could be. But right now, we're sitting in a work session.
But that's a good point. Do we flip-flop on them? Do we have the work session the next meeting? Because we are voting on a policy.
Well, if that's the case, then we'll just wait on the policies until October 28th.
Oh, yeah.
Right, so the next meeting.
Okay,
that would
discuss. Yeah, 28th, okay, is Amy?
Well, and that's for the superintendent and the board chair to decide
Sure.
So we have a small briefing from high school, and then we're gonna work that. Approve all the other stuff ahead of time, the other things.
And then the 2 workshop topics for October 14th would be communications planning, and then also policy 522 or Minnesota state law, Title IX. I'll come up with a word for that.
I mean, it's communications is what I was thinking. It's still communications, right? So, get the communication plan, but communication, we should be communicating these kinds of things, so that should be part of the plan.
Oh.
I just think, I don't know why it would be different.
I think what Pam is concerned about is that I would say the majority of our parents have no idea of the federal law changes.
Right.
I would say some at this board table aren't familiar with the federal changes that were made. And I think this table needs to understand it. And then the public needs to be aware, the parents of our students need to be aware. Because there was some big changes that were made. So,
So you're suggesting communications of those changes with the public, and that's why you're thinking it'd be part of the communications?
Yeah, I mean, I look at communications as pretty big, right? I mean, communications, I don't know what your thoughts around communication planning was, but, to me, that's all part of it. Is legislation and how it affects your school and your students, along with levy, I mean, everything, I mean.
Yeah, and certainly we can set it up however people want. I just want to make sure that, we have a chance to talk about communications planning, because that includes website work, some of our communications with parents through, bill newsletters. You know, do we, consider adding more mailings, paper mailings to resident, it's those kinds of things. So if we just kind of focus on that at the beginning.
Yeah, and this would be a subsection of that, to your point.
Yeah, we'll make it work regardless.
I would offer just something for the superintendent and the board chair to think about is, if they feel like the next meeting is the correct spot for it, what may be better is a presentation of the federal change at a board meeting, so that at that time, the full public is aware of the federal changes that were made by the government imposed on our schools.
You're talking Title IX.
I'm talking about the federal changes that were made to, that are in that policy, that I'm not even sure if I don't think you're aware of either of the changes.
You go online, there's so much out there, it's like, wow, where do you stop with this stuff?
Yeah, well, this is a big deal, I think, for parents to be aware of the changes that were made with regards to locker rooms and bathrooms and so I would ask that instead of it being in a work session, I think you stick to your deal of talking about how we're gonna communicate with our parents, and that this is different, this is something that we need to communicate to our parents. So I would say that it be placed on the agenda, asking them, that would be up to them. I would prefer that it just be on an agenda, maybe the end of October, a presentation of the changes that were made, because they made big changes and what those changes are, so that our parents are then aware and they'll be able to know what they are.
My concern is a presentation is one thing, how many people watch the school board meetings, how many people, all that. So to me, I want something that's much more.
Yes, to go out to the
That goes
parents.
out to parents, that's on permission sheets for overnight stays, because overnight stays are affected. So field trips. There's things that parents need to all know, and I think as a board, if there's things that we need to change around policy or around practices, that we can talk about that also and say, maybe we, do things differently going forward.
How do we follow federal law, but also
Do due diligence to the students.
Yes.
And parents.
Thumbs up, should it be a workshop topic?
So if we're talking communication to parents, I think we need to let Brandon get educated first, up to speed on what the implications for districts are and how we're going to move forward. And we need to let our staff guide when this discussion can happen and that we're prepared for the discussion.
There's a lot of information, she went for training on it on Friday, so that's what I'm saying, there's a lot of information when you go into it. It just doesn't want to end, so many questions on it. But we'll bring it together, do it the best we can, what we know at our level. All right, any other discussion?
So-
Yes, ma'am.
federal law, when did it go into effect?
Yeah, the guidelines are August 1st, 2024.
So they're in effect right now.
Right.
So my point is, the sooner our parents are aware,
Exactly.
the better. This isn't when can we pull this all together? This is a big deal, and the sooner the better. ASAP, that our parents are made aware of the changes.
We can continue.
The better. They're federal law. We have to comply here in our district. So let's make sure that our parents are aware of how we have to comply and what it entails us to do.
I think we need to offer options. We need to offer options. We can't just say, oh, this is happening and oh, well, we have to get ahead of it. We're already behind it. So we have to make a concerted effort to make sure everybody understands it and knows it so they can make some decisions. For their
But I wouldn't say we're behind, if it's all coming together yet. I mean, you
No,
can't-
because it's law now.
Right, as of August to the August, but if we all
So
change,
shared spaces is law
yeah, I agree.
now. Okay, it's being worked, it's
So
already
the
here.
parents need to know.
Parents need to know.
All right,
We'll come up with something. I'm not sure if it's gonna be a report, an update, but I think I'll still shoot for October 14th with whatever Brandon can share and feel comfortable. There will still be a lot of unknowns because there are thousands and thousands of questions that people are asking. So, but we'll at least share what we can.
Yeah, there's some real basics that are right in front of us now, and we need to make sure parents are all aware.
okay, any other further about meetings, workshops, whatever, if not, okay, Mr. Nate, we've been up to.
Attended the insurance advisory meeting on the 17th of September. Just wanted to give the board a heads up on some timelines that we're looking at coming forward with the hit of the Health Insurance Transparency Act process is in place. The district has been doing this for a long time. But the district will be putting out a request for proposals in January. Quotes usually come back the end of March. And then PEEP, which is what we are currently using, gets after that. They come back. In April, it goes in front of the board, and then in May, open enrollment comes out. So just want to give some expectations of our timeline as it comes to insurance. Good meeting. And then I've been debating if I'm going to say something or not, but I think I'm going to. So I just want to remind us all as a board that we are supposed to work together as a team for betterment of this district. We owe it to each other, we owe it to our community and to our students to be responsive as well as understanding. We talk about not being fair. I think some of the discussions and the way that we are handling things as a board, not as individuals, but as a board, is not fair to this district, is not fair to what our mission is as a school board. That's just my 2 cents.
Thank you, and
I just want to remind everybody, if you're not sure who the candidates are for the upcoming school board election, there is going to be a opportunity to sit and listen to what your candidates have to say tomorrow, September 24th. That's Tuesday, September 24th, 7 o'clock at the high school Performing Arts Center. So you might get some clarity if you attend that on who to vote for.
Pam,
I haven't had any committees, so I don't have anything to report.
Rob,
I attended the APAC. They're doing some great things over there. They're trying to get kids enrolled. So if you have know of anybody that can enroll, reach out to the APAC committee.
Amy,
I'm going to give a huge shout out to our transportation department. Last Friday, there was an accident that it didn't involve our bus, it didn't involve our students. But some of our students saw what happened. And kudos to Patty, because she called the parents and said, you may want my grandchildren on the bus. And she said you may want to greet your grandchildren at the end of the driveway because they're all upset at what they saw. She didn't have to do that. She could have just let the kids get off the bus. But she wanted to make sure because some of them were very distraught at what they were witnessing. I also want to say they have, my children, my grandkids have the best bus driver back. Kudos to God. Because she handled the situation like just, it couldn't have gone any better at this horrible incident. Some of the kids were crying hysterically. And she allowed them to call their parents, be reassured. And then as tears were streaming down their face, I should be crying right now, but I am, I apologize. But as they were crying, he asked one of my grandchildren, can we please pray for the person who's in the vehicle that they were witnessing? And right there, she stopped and she prayed with the children to make sure that, that was their way. And, it was horrible. You don't want your grandkids to experience something like that. But what made it better were the employees here. We have top-notch employees. Top-notch. She called not only them, but afterwards to make sure that the kids were okay on Friday. And then again, she called my daughter today just to find out, and they were all sharing the great news, that the person in the vehicle was going to be okay. And so I just, again, hats off to, we have so many great people that work for this district, and in times when, during difficult times, they pull together. And we have awesome employees at this district. Awesome employees. And I just want to give a kudos out to all of them because they go above and beyond for their students in this district. They really and truly care about the kids, and it shows during these traumatic times. So hats off. You can let Peggy know and Beth know, and I'm sure all of our employees, they just step up during these times. And we don't know when these times are gonna arise with our kids, it just happens. But yeah, it was great. Kudos to Beth because they allowed her to take the fire extinguisher out of the bus and go break the back window, which allowed them to get in and then help the person that was in the vehicle. And so it was just a horrible thing that you don't want kids to have to witness, but boy, it's just, they're fine now. I mean, for some reason, they were supposed to go through this, but again, kudos off to our transportation department because, again, it's open. I could go on and on about the transportation department of how great it is. I constantly hear from my kids how great it is. So kudos to this district, and that's all I have.
Jill?
Thank you, Amy, for your comments and all that.
Sorry I cried, but it's like, oh my gosh, they're my grandbabies. I just adore them. So great thing for this district.
And they're in our care.
They're in your care and they're in great care, and I have no question about that when they're there, so.
Yeah, when I talked to Peggy about the accident to her, she said he saw the car coming, and they crossed in front of the bus, hit the tree head on. And the kids saw all that happen, and they did assist with the fire extinguisher. The nurse was right behind them. The nurse jumped in, started CPR on the individual inside the car. Yet she had to stay with the kids, and that's her responsibility, which she did. And things just worked out from there. The gentleman had a heart attack and crossed over and hit the tree, but yet found out as of today, he's gonna live, he'll be okay. But yeah, it was a heck of a hit, I guess, on that tree right in front of our bus and our kids. And our bus driver did an outstanding job to help out.
Outstanding job. And the first thing the grandkids said when they walked in both households was, he's alive, he's gonna make it. So they thought about him all weekend long. There was a few times I heard that they asked their parents about him. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Okay, other than that, we're done with the meeting at 8:40. Thank you for coming in.
Jill, did you?
She had nothing.
Okay.
So we'll see y'all in 2 weeks again. Committee members, Nate and Jill, make sure you get together, get a date set with Carson for your first meeting.